Hi, everybody. It's Lainey, and I am here today to chat with you about raising kids who are challenging in a very specific way. And the title that I chose for this was Raising Your ADHD Kid Like a Pro. But I want to start off by saying that I don't like identifying kids according to labels. And so what I'm going to be talking about today has to do with raising kids who are either have a diagnosis of ADHD, which does not mean that that label defines them. I just want to be very clear about that. Or if you have a child who is exhibiting behaviors that have made you thought along the way, my child might have, like if I took my child to be diagnosed, they might get this diagnosis, but I'm not taking my child to be diagnosed because I don't want to go that route. That's fine. Or if your child has been given a diagnosis and you're choosing to not medicate your child. Because the truth is that kids who have the behaviors of a kid who have ADHD need to be parented in specific ways that kids who have a slower temperament or a more easy temperament don't require. So whether your child has a diagnosis or not, or is medicated or not, it doesn't really matter to me. I will say if your child is medicated though, and you're not dealing with difficult or challenging behaviors because the medication has resolved those behaviors, you know, this may or may not apply to you. But if you're thinking of taking your child off of medication, and at some point, if you're not planning on to medicate your child for his or her whole life, and you want to be building your parenting skills, then this is definitely a training that would be helpful to you. I hope it will be. So let me move into my experience with kids who have either behaviors that look like ADHD or have actual diagnoses with ADHD. And I want to start off by saying that about 30 years ago, I was working with a very wide population of kids who were diagnosed with lots of different things. Kids who were, the catch-all phrase for them was emotionally disturbed. And some of them were behavioral and some of them were emotional. They were all inner city kids. And I was working at a residential summer camp for these kids. Their parents were not there. Their parents were getting a break from their kids, and we had them. And not only did we have them, but we had them without their medication. Because most of these kids, while their parents were taking a break from parenting, the kids were taking a break from being on their medications. So I got to have the honor of working with these kids who were all sorts of diagnosed and medicated during the school year. Not all of them were medicated, but many of them were. But I got to work with them and really live with them and essentially be their stand-in mother, because it was a residential camp, without their medications. So I got them in what I call their raw form, the way that, they came into this world in their natural state. And I saw a lot of really fascinating, interesting, challenging behaviors coming out of these kids. And a lot of them did have diagnoses of ADHD. At the time, it was actually just called ADD. It wasn't ADHD. And in my training, I got a lot of training and working before the kids even arrived at camp every summer. We got a lot of training. And one of the most essential takeaways that I got from the trainings every year was the reminder, first the learning and then the reminder, that kids are kids. And first and foremost, no matter what diagnosis a child has, they are first and foremost the child. And that there are so many behaviors that a quote unquote normal child can have that can look like a diagnosis. So this was 30 years ago. Kids were not being as heavily diagnosed or as frequently diagnosed as they are now. And even then, the diagnoses were coming pretty quickly. But that it's really important to recognize what is normal kid behavior and what is sort of out of bounds. What makes a kid who gets a diagnosis, or you're thinking about getting a diagnosis, what makes the behaviors have this sort of tail end, right? It's like that piece of it is not sort of like in bounds, or that piece of it is not really typical. That's not what I'm seeing from most of the other kids on the playground. My kid is different in some way. And if you don't know how to parent your child who is showing these differences, right, in different ways, what's going to end up happening are two things. One is you will feel very powerless because you're going to be using parenting tools that kind of should work for kids but don't seem to work for your kid, right? And most of us are going to be doing what was done to us as parents when we were kids, what our parents did, and we'll end up parenting our kids in a way that if we don't get alternate training, we'll just kind of do and say what was said and done to us. And if you're cool with that, and if it's working with your kid, then, I don't really have anything to offer you. But if you're somebody who is doing and saying things that were done to you, or you're trying to do things differently and they're not working with your child because he or she is super challenging, then I've got a lot for you, actually. So what I was saying is that two things are going to happen. You're either going to be frustrated and upset by your challenging child because the typical stuff is not working, or you are going to miss out on the opportunity to see your child, the child's typical behavior as the child's behavior, and it's not the difficult behavior, right? So often what I'm trying to say is parents will confuse normal child behavior for, let's just call it abnormal behavior, right? For unusual behavior or challenging behavior. But so often what our kids are demonstrating with their behavior, even if they have a diagnosis, is what I would call, quote unquote, normal child behavior. So not every bit of your child's behavior is a part of his or her diagnosis if they have a diagnosis, and not every aspect of your child's behavior is a part of their challenging behavior pattern if you have a child who is just showing has not been diagnosed, and you're not looking for a diagnosis. Okay, so I'm talking to kind of a wide range of people here right now. Okay, so by ADHD kid, I'm not only talking about kids who have a diagnosis. I am talking to parents with that. Talking to parents who don't want to medicate their kids if they have a diagnosis. I'm also talking to parents who have been sort of self-diagnosing their kids, right? Like, I don't know, mine is just kind of different. So I want to empower you. I want you to feel like you have the ability to have an approach for parenting your challenging child, your ADHD child in this case, so that you can thrive as a family. Which brings me to step one. I'm going to be talking about 3 steps today. So if you are a nerd like me and you want to pull out your paper and your pen and take some notes, or your notebook, or your phone or whatever, that's totally fine by me. So this is going to be step number 1 in parenting your ADHD or ADHD symptomatic child like a pro. The first step is going to be shifting your mindset. It's so important that parents of challenging kids learn to shift their mindset from, I just got to get through this. I just got to survive. I just got to take it, as long as nobody's, losing their shit right now, it's going to be okay. From that survival mentality, we've got to shift it to how things are going to thrive. We've got to get parents' mindsets around the idea that even if you have a challenging child, and I speak to parents every day who have challenging kids, that it is possible to thrive. And that's going to be different in everybody's family. I'm not holding up a picture of how that's going to look like in your family. I'm not giving you a soundtrack to how that's going to sound in your family, but the idea, just the idea that your family could thrive instead of just survive. It might be a radical concept for you right now. And I see I have people hopping in to this training today. And if you would just, give me your thumbs up or heart or whatever emoji speaks to you as I'm talking, that would be really helpful. And if you want to chime in and say hi, that would be really good. I just see lots of people coming in, and I don't get to see your names as you come in. So I'm very curious who's here with me. So just say hi. In developing a new mindset and shifting your mindset from surviving to thriving, you have to take a couple of really radical steps. First of all, you've got to create doubt in your belief system, in your current belief system. If your current belief system is one of surviving, you've got to start creating doubt around that belief system. Well, you'd ask yourself, is it true that I have to kind of lower my bar to the point where I'm just merely surviving every day? Are things always going to be this hard? Check in with your self-talk around your whole situation. What is your self-talk around the whole situation, around your child? What are your beliefs? Ask yourself, what are your beliefs around raising this child who, is presenting, maybe diagnosed, maybe not, but presenting as having some sort of attention issue, or has more energy than other kids, is always on the go? Ask yourself, do you have the tools and the support to properly parent them? When I say properly, I don't mean that there's one right way to do it. I mean properly in a way that feels good to you, where at the end of the day, you feel like, you know what, I've got my child on the best path possible for him or her. I've got my child on a path where he or she is going to optimize herself in life. Does he or she have challenges? Sure, my kid has challenges. Is my kid quirky? Yeah, my kid's quirky, right? But am I confidently doing the things that need to be done to make sure that my kid is on the right path for him or her? Not on somebody else's path, not trying to become somebody who they're not, right? Not trying to become, a carbon copy of their cousin or of their friend or anybody else, but that they are on the path to become the best version of themselves. And that's all we could ever hope for our kids, right? It's all we could ever hope for, is that they become the best version of themselves. They can't be. Being the best version of yourself is always going to be better than being a cheap imitation of somebody else, right? So the question is, do you have the tools and the support you need to help your child be on that path that you want them to be on? Hi, Christy. See, now your name popped up, but I have all these other people in the session, and I don't know why their names aren't popping up. But say hi if you're here. Give me a thumbs up if what I'm saying is resonating with you. It'd be really helpful to me. So that was step number one, which is shifting your mindset from surviving to thriving. The second step in parenting your child, your challenging child, your challenging child who's got the symptoms or maybe the diagnosis of ADHD, you know if your child is having trouble paying attention. You know if your child is the one who's running around in the music class instead of sitting on your lap. Every time, not just once, but every time. If your child is the one who, instead of staying on the path at the park, they're all over the place. And if you're the one who can't sit down with the other parents at the picnic, and instead you've got to really follow your kid around, right? And you've got to listen in and you've got to watch him, because your child's going to be at the center of whatever conflict is going to come up, right? If there are tears and they're screaming, there's a really good chance that your kid's going to have a part in it, right? Either causing it or the recipient of it, okay? So diagnosis or not, what's going on for your kid and who your kid is. So step two is making sure that you get the right tools to parent your child. Trying something over and over again is really insanity. Trying tools and parenting suggestions that are not going to be right for your kid is going to make you feel insane. It's going to make you feel powerless. It's going to make you feel enraged because you're going to be repeating yourself. You're going to be like, why isn't my child taking the message and learning? You know, this is the 100th time I've said it. And some of this will apply, by the way, to kids who don't have a diagnosis, right? For kids who aren't even, giving their parents that hard of a time. If you're a parent who finds yourself repeating yourself a lot, then you've got to look at, oh, this repeating thing is not helping. It's not working. It never works. Repeating and repeating does not work. It's the same thing as trying the same thing again and again and again, expecting the results to be different. And that's where the insanity comes in. And that's where the rage can come in as a parent. If you've ever found yourself, your child is doing something and really you've told them, let's say it's been 1,000 times. You've actually told them 1,000 times not to do it. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I've told him 1,000 times. I've told her 1,000 times. I counted. I kept count, right? We have to really check in with what our initial expectations of parenting are, right? We have to check in with, well, did I think it was going to take 1,000? And so, well, here we are at 1,500 and she still got, what's your reaction to that? What's your attachment to that idea, right? Maybe it will take 2,000. I don't know. None of us knows going into it what's going to take for our child to get the message. But repeating ourselves again and again in the moment and losing our patience with our kid because they haven't gotten the message, that will never work. It will never work. So we have to make sure that the tools are the right ones for you to use. And with a kid who's got ADHD, there is going to be a lot of repetition. There is. But there's also going to be a lot of modeling. There has to be a lot of calm modeling. And the most important thing here is that you've got to be able to do the teaching, the repetitive teaching for your child in a calm way, because nobody is able to learn when they are in a stressed environment. The brain, once it has been fired up to be stressed out, is only thinking about one thing, and that's survival. So if your child's in a survival state, you've yelled at them or they've gotten startled or they feel like you're yelling at them, because kids in this category can feel like you're yelling at them, sensitive kids, even though you're not. Maybe you changed your tone slightly. Maybe you raised your voice in your opinion slightly, but your child is like, stop yelling at me, right? They can misread social cues. Their brains are going so fast. They can really miss social cues. They can miss facial expressions. They can miss tone of voice. They can misinterpret things really easy. As smart as they are, ADHD does not mean your child is not brilliant, right? In fact, many of them are. But they will miss things because everything is going so fast and they're taking so much in. It's like a computer with too many tabs open. It's like so much information coming in all at once. So when you have the right tools, right, when you're able to slow down, when you're able to model for your child what needs to be done, and you're able to do that repeatedly in a calm way, your child will be learning. And when you're able to set up systems for your child in a way that will actually work for them, in a way that you can explain to them and review with them without you repeating yourself. There are ways, you can write something down. There can be checklists that your child is then responsible for. A child with a true ADHD diagnosis, are they going to need a lot more hand-holding and a lot more supervision? Yes. Yes, they will. And what's your reaction to that? Is your reaction, hi, Julia. Hi. I'm so glad you're saying hi. Thank you. It's good to have you here. What's your reaction when you hear, oh, your child is going to need a lot more repetition. Your child is going to need a lot more patience from you. Your child is going to need a lot more tools. Is it like, oh, gosh, I didn't sign up for this? Maybe. That would be a natural reaction, right? Do you move from that into, this is shifting the mindset, step one, I'm backing up a little bit, to thinking about thriving, like, okay, how is this going to serve us? How is this one day going to serve her? How am I going to be setting her or him up for success, given that this is a child who's going to need a lot of repetition? How am I managing my own emotions around this and my own reactions around this, about getting this information, about figuring out this information, about getting a diagnosis or not? How am I going to be managing my own self, my own expectations around this child and his or her needs, because the needs are there. And getting angry and the repeating are not going to work for these kids. In fact, it will backfire and it will make them feel worse about themselves, because they're probably already, as they get older, if they haven't, when they're younger, if they haven't tuned in, as they get older, they will start to self-reflect and say, why does everyone yell at me? What's wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me? And I'm not opposed to, kids having, sometimes a diagnosis can be helpful. Well, let's find out. Is there something wrong with you? No, inherently, something wrong with you, essentially wrong with you? No, you're lovable, you're amazing at these things. Everybody has their challenges, right? But if getting a diagnosis is going to help somebody feel better and say, oh, yeah, there actually is something different about my brain and I need things to be done this way or that way, that's okay. That's about getting strategies, right? It doesn't let them off the hook, though. It should never let them off the hook. Well, I've got ADHD, therefore I can't listen to you right now, or therefore I can't, or therefore you have to, or blah, blah, blah. Like they have to be held accountable to the level that they can be held accountable. The third step in parenting your ADHD kid or your child who has ADHD-like symptoms, like a pro, parenting them like a pro, is to get the proper support. Now, I talk to a lot of parents about parenting. And all I can say is that parenting a challenging child, especially a kid with ADHD, or ADHD symptoms, is a child who's going to most likely have challenges getting along with other kids. There will be challenges. And hi, Shannon, good to have you here. And it can be very isolating. I was talking to a mom this weekend and she was just crying. She was saying, her child has been diagnosed with ADHD and a couple of other things. And she just said, I didn't expect parenting to be so lonely. I thought parenting was going to be this communal, community thing. And I was going to make friends and I was going to, my child was going to make friends and we were going to make lifelong friends. And she was just like, he doesn't get the invitations to the parties unless it's a whole class invitation or the whole grade invitation, right? He doesn't make friends easily, or if he makes friends, he doesn't keep them. He doesn't know how, because he doesn't read the facial expressions very well. He doesn't read the body language very well, and he makes other kids upset a lot. He says what's on his mind, and he doesn't stop himself from saying things out loud. And the older that he gets, the lonelier he is, but the more isolated we are as a family. And she was just, she was really in tears, and I felt really bad. And I asked her, do you have support for this? Well, I'm doing this class, I'm doing that class, whatever. And I was like, but you're still doing it all alone. Is there a place, I was asking her, is there a place that you have where people are actually sharing their struggles in a healthy way and learning how to thrive, even though their kids all share this same diagnosis? And she was like, well, I'm in a Facebook group or whatever. And I was like, well, that could be the blind leading the blind. And she was like, yeah, it's kind of blind leading the blind. So I just want to make sure that you guys aren't trying to do this alone. It can feel like sometimes you don't even like your child. I know you love your child, but it can sometimes feel like you don't like your child. And if that's true for you, if you've ever had that thought, everyone has had that thought from time to time, but if it's becoming a more consistent thought for you, that's a really painful place to be. And most parents are not going to understand that feeling, or at least admit to it. But if that's something that you're experiencing, I would say, first of all, you're not alone. And secondly, don't keep yourself alone and don't keep yourself isolated. It's really, really essential that you are not isolated in your life. And if having a challenging kid has isolated you, you've got to find ways to not isolate. Julia, your Bible study has been your saving grace. Wonderful. I'm so glad you have that. It's great. I think also from a parenting perspective, it's important to have a parenting community of people who you can actually talk to about parenting a challenging child, right? Because if you're in a group, let's just say um, at a play group, and all the moms are talking about, oh, and my child, they're going to this camp or they're going to that camp, and you might be sitting there in shame. If you're able to sit at all, because you're not chasing your kid around the playground, making sure they're not getting into stuff that or saying things that they shouldn't be doing or saying. And you're sitting there in this group thinking, man, my kid can't go to that camp, or my kid would just, fall apart at that camp, or they don't have the services for my kid, or, can start to create quite a loop of parenting beliefs and parenting experience that can really bring you down. And even with friends and family, like if you have a brother or sister who has kids and your kid is the one who doesn't get along with the cousins, or your sister and your brother or your in-laws, whatever, they want to talk to you about parenting, but you gotta sort of put on a face when you're talking about it, and you're tired of putting on the face when you're talking about it because actually things are hard, or people are tired of hearing of how hard things are, and they're like, look, why don't you just whatever they suggest, and something you don't want to do, right? Whatever the thing is, it doesn't matter. Maybe you should do it this way, maybe you should do it that way, and you're like, maybe that would work for your kid, but it's not going to work for my kid, or that's not the way I want to do it, right? It's really important that you have the proper support and you have a parenting tribe to help support you. So those are the 3 steps that I want to make sure that you know about with working with kids who are struggling with ADHD symptoms, or I will say a kid who has a diagnosis of ADHD and you're choosing to not medicate. Because my understanding, my experience is that if you have a child who has a diagnosis of ADHD and you're medicating them for it, which I don't judge, but if you are medicating, you're not going to be necessarily dealing with the same parenting challenges. But again, I will say that at some point, if and when you're taking your child off of the medication, you're going to have parenting skills ready to go in your back pocket that are not, they're probably not going to be your typical parenting skills. You're going to need a lot more at the ready. You're going to need more on the inside in terms of managing your own self and learning how to manage your own experience parenting this child, and more on the outside as far as what to offer them when they are struggling. Because even if they outgrow a diagnosis, even if they outgrow, being like classically ADHD, they may still exhibit some behaviors and some challenges, and they may have some challenges along their life. I mean, everybody does, right? Everybody has challenges. But some things they may grow out of and some things they may not grow out of. And if you don't know how to help them through that, besides just talking to them about it, which really just gets me all riled up, and people are like, well, I'm talking to my kid about it. When a kid has a challenge that makes, if you're repeating yourself like a lot and you're feeling, crazy about it and resentful about it, it means that your kid's either not getting the message, or either your child's not getting the message because they're not hearing it right, or they're not getting the message because you're not able to present it right. And whether your child has a diagnosis or not, it's important that you're able to deliver your message in a way that lands with your child. And there are ways to do that with kids with diagnoses and without diagnoses. So that's what I have for you today in this mini training session. And just to recap, the first step is going to be about shifting your mindset. I can't say enough about this, from just surviving to thriving. And it's not just the words, it's the work around shifting your mindset. The second one is getting the right tools in place. And the third thing is getting the proper support. Okay, so mindset, tools, and support. Those are going to be your mission if you are looking to raise your kid, regardless of a diagnosis. You're looking to raise your kid to be the best version of him or herself. That is what you're going to have in place. And if you'd like to talk to me about it, I'm always here for a phone call. If you haven't had your phone call with me before, please take advantage of it. Everybody gets one. It's parentingparachute.com/call. And I'm putting that down there right now. And I am happy to talk to you and hear what's going on. And if I can help you, I am more than happy to. And if I can't help you, I'll point you in another direction. So either way, there's nothing to lose and there are no strings attached. I am seriously just here to help you be a happier, healthier, calmer, more joyful parent. And I want to teach you how to give all of that to your kids because they're so deserving. And I know they're super challenging. I know they are. And I would love to help you if I can. So let's find out. Book a call and we'll talk and we'll take it from there. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day and I will see you soon. I'll see you next week for sure. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.